Hey everybody, this is Darin Francis with Signals in Higher Ed, and I'm also the CEO of Harbinger Lane. Um, we've got a great show for you today. We're talking about the first year experience, and this episode is sponsored by Podium Education. Podium has been a friend of the show for a number of months and sponsored several episodes. Really excited to have this panel together for this conversation. And so welcome everybody to the podcast. So let me go ahead and just do a quick round of introductions so everybody is aware of who's here. I'm gonna start with you, Brandy. Brandy Papadon Smith. You are the Senior Director of University College at Arizona State University. I appreciate you joining us today.
Yeah, thank
Yeah.
you.
Yeah. And then Dr. Thomas Chase Haygood, Vice Provost for Student Success with the University of Utah. Thanks for joining us as well.
Happy to be here, Darren. Thanks.
And lastly, but not least, we've got Dr. Nicole Crevar. She's leading the career discovery experience at Podium Education. Welcome, Nicole.
Thanks, Darren. Excited to be here.
Awesome. So I've got some questions teed up for you, but I want to just frame the conversation together. Uh, when I think about a large um, uh, strategic interest topic like the first year experience, it sort of falls into a category of super important. Everybody owns it. So therefore, in a way, sometimes nobody owns it. And I think we want to sort of dispel that myth and understand institutionally how you all are thinking about the first year experience. And I really love that from the two institutions that we have represented here, we're going to have, I think, a diversity of context. We've got different student populations that we're considering and different educational experiences. And so looking forward to talking about that. But I think maybe what we should do just to get started, Brandy, I'll start with you. Um, and then I'll ask Chase the same question. But in your role, maybe just talk a little bit about how you would think about your role in terms of the first year experience. What touches the first year experience from your team's vantage point? And then what sort of sits outside of your team when it comes to the first year experience?
I think it's a great description that you mentioned about, it's in some ways it's everybody's responsibility. And then sometimes that turns into whose responsibility, right? And I think that for us in the space that we sit in and the team that I get the chance to work with, I predominantly work with our Work Plus Learn team. And that's a program, our portfolio of variety of programs and initiatives that are focused on this idea of how do we better integrate working and learning experiences. So we are one of those partners to the first year experience. We certainly don't own it. We're not necessarily in our area offering classes, but we partner very closely with areas on campus like our Student Success Center or our Explore program that are really focused on the first year and that transition and that success to help students persist from fall to spring and then retain fall to fall, right? And I think from our perspective, we're one of those partners that is looking a little bit into the future and thinking about, preparedness for post completion. And then looking at how can some of the programs and initiatives that we're engaged with really support and integrate into that first year experience in a way that feels streamlined, in a way that feels like it's not adding more and on top of to the student experience. There's a lot packed in that first year already. And so just thinking, where are there opportunities, whether that's within exploratory classes or our Explore program that is focused on this idea of you don't have to declare first day the thing that you are guaranteeing to stick with as a major for the entire 4 years you're with us, actually embracing that concept of exploration and declaring explore as a major for your first couple of semesters and engaging in experiences that are intended to help you explore your interests. It's a really good example of an area that we partner with to bring experiential learning opportunities into that space of that first year exploration. So just one of a couple of examples, but where we really sit as a partner to a couple of those different areas on campus that are supporting very specifically the first year approach.
Love that. You kind of hit on a few elements. One is the collaborative effort you have across ASU, but also just driving in towards explore as a strategy, giving students that permission to not declare right away. Yeah, that's exciting. Chase, what about you? What's been what's where is your domain? Obviously, you're overall of student success, so I think you've got a different setup there. But talk a little bit about first what sits in your world and what doesn't, and then yeah, then your thoughts as well.
One of the well, what sits in and what doesn't is a really interesting phenomenon. We're experiencing such change in higher education today, I think, and certainly the University of Utah is not immune to it. We like to think, like our good friends down at ASU, that we're part of the innovation and the change that helps drive us towards seeking both, academic excellence and access for our students and a brighter future, right, as they exit our institutions. So my scope and purview at present is the kind of ins and outs of undergraduate education and what does it take from advising and career success coaching, the undergraduate kind of curriculum, shared governance processes, all the way across the bow to transfer student and first generation student success, trio programs, all of the kind of programs that Brandy was kind of describing, our version of a Work Plus. We call it Learn and Earn, likely soon to be a Work Plus Utah. We're working on it, Brandy. Our ability to think about holistically the student experience and the ways in which, as they come to us from a myriad of backgrounds, which we celebrate and we're excited about, that we acknowledge, right? I'll give two kind of organizing principles, and then if I can, I'll tell you a little bit about how we're trying to approach the first year through those principles. But one of those is like, students aren't all starting the race of higher education from the same start line. They're just simply not. I mean, there's too much overwhelming evidence and research from our colleagues in educational, both higher ed, secondary, primary education, trying to think about the kind of social determinants, not necessarily of health, but the social determinants of educational success. And our ability to meet students where they are is really important. And our ability to do that in today's environment and the political landscape and the way that we think about how do we prepare students for the future. That's kind of organizational principle or philosophy number one. And the other one is trying to think through first year, especially, or first experiences, which has been our approach at the University of Utah. Like, what are those kind of seminal first experiences that a student, be they low income first gen, multi gen, affluent, they could be a transfer student, they could be a working parent, they could be any number of kind of things. Again, acknowledging that philosophy one, as we build with the approach of saying, how is it that we create a university that every student can be successful in? I know we'll chat more probably about some programmatic elements that help us accomplish that. But it really is that core philosophical approach to how do we build an institution. And from my background as a first gen college kiddo, work from the working class of this country, like if we build it in a way that we know first gen students and low income students and rural students, and we, with all of that from kind of that first point poured into the design process, then we know it will work for any number of students, right? So for the U, that's meant designing a first experience, not a first year experience, but a set of first experiences at the U around three core principles. And I'll make it quick. One of the greatest expressions of it is through exploration, or program that we call Quest, and we could talk more about. But Quest is part of a larger first experience kind of landscape wherein we're asking faculty as well as peer-to-peer mentors to think about three core principles. Connection, like what does it take to find your community, to connect with them, if just for a semester, if for 4 years. That we again reflect back to students their own agency and their own ability to decide. A second principle of empowerment, and that you get there in the educational context through knowledge and skills and competencies, and to Brandy's point, experiences, their experiential learning getting threaded into these first experience courses, and co-curriculum will be next on the horizon. And finally, impact. Like, what are the pathways and the purpose that you're seeking as an individual that we're there to help connect, right? Academic experience and coursework to your future goals and where your career as well as life can take you. And how will you contribute to society and how will you be civically engaged? So that's been some of the things that we've been up to of late when it comes to thinking about meeting students in their first experiences here at the University of Utah.
There's a lot to unpack there, and I really love the emphasis on first experiences. You made a good case for that across the board. And then that one of your 3 core principles is effectively belonging, connection. Like I get all of it makes a lot of sense, but I'm glad that you named that, uh, something like that in the mix here. Um, Nicole, give us your take. I mean, you talk about your experience in sort of the classroom years teaching, but also now building the career discovery experience and facilitating the career discovery experience. What's the through line from your classroom experience to the work that you're doing today?
That's a really great question. I'm certainly going to echo Brandy and Chase with this idea of exploration being very important for the first year experience. So our career discovery experience at Podium really brings the real world of careers into the classroom. So we're bringing in that like experiential learning, work integrated learning element, so that students can gain some clarity on their career or major or kind of what they want to do earlier on, right? Like trying on those hats earlier. And a lot of my work at Podium is informed by my teaching in higher ed for the past 7+ years. I've been in the classroom largely teaching college writing and freshman comp. I'm teaching the freshmen, right? That's the class every student has to take. And a lot of them are undecided or they're decided and they're not sure. And I mean, we'll get into like the many variables of that first year experience and what students are going through. But I've also I directed a college access program while I was at the University of Arizona. So I've also kind of seen earlier in the pipeline of high school students thinking about, is college even the right path for me, right? So these kind of like different moments all really do factor into that first year experience, like the high school into college, right? Actually in the classroom and what am I doing? What type of exposure do I need? And so I really do think personally, it all comes back to high impact practices. Ideally, work integrated learning or community integrated learning, right? Some way engaging them so that they're getting ideas and personal feedback, right? Collecting that data and kind of deciding what they do or don't like, what they might want to explore as a major. So it's kind of like in the nutshell, I would say high impact practices for sure.
All right. Well, why don't we just for a minute? I want to sit with the problem space, because I feel like you all have so many good solutions. But I do want to sort of sit with it for a minute and just contextualize it a little bit further in your day to day. So, Brandy, why don't I start with you? I really liked when we spoke before. You gave me kind of a way of thinking about how things have progressed. I don't think it was just ASU. I think it's just been generally. But you were talking about how we first organized in higher ed around access. Then we kind of reorganized around completion goals. And today you sit, and I think Chase, you kind of said this too. You kind of sit in the context now of really kind of post completion success. Um, but but yeah, I'm just wondering from the way you're seeing the world today, um, what does post completion success do for you today in and what does it sort of ask of that first year student? Talk a little bit more about that.
Absolutely, yeah. So, I think to the point of the organization of, higher ed and the push that we would say we're definitely here in ASU, and I think our partners at University of Utah absolutely are, as well as many, other institutions, but trying to push the sector as a whole to say the focus on post completion success is in reality taking responsibility for the success of our learners after they leave our physical, virtual, whatever walls you want to refer to are the experience they have with us as an institution. It's no longer saying it's okay for us to get them to the finish line of graduation and then say, "Good luck. We hope it goes well for you out there." Right? It's owning the space of what we do and how we engage them with the time we have with them is critically important to their success after. We no longer have that. And we have to accept the responsibility for how we design that experience in a way that is built upon where evidence is showing and pointing us to the highest likelihoods of success post completion. And so, what that means, I think, for that first year that we have with them is just a frank acknowledgement of it. It's an acknowledgement of the data. I mean, just point to one study of many that, Lumina and Gallup continue to do, the state of higher education. And I think the most recent one, more than two-thirds of currently enrolled college students point to expected job opportunities as the top reason they're enrolled. Why did they come to college? Why are they pursuing this, credential of higher education? And we just simply need to sit in and own that. It is not an and or space that I think oftentimes the conversation gets put into of the academy versus the world of work, right? It's a both and. They are coming to us because of a belief that we can offer an experience, a set of experiences that is going to lead to a better life for them, both economically and non-economically. For us, it's a point towards work integrated learning as a through line of which we're working with our partners at our institution and nationally to think about how do we redesign elements of the academic experience that are built upon work integrated learning that is showing that early exposure to work as soon as possible. When we think about that first year experience, it's how are we giving our students from the first semester exposure and opportunity to what they want to do when they leave? How do we help them start, beginning to make some of those decisions or build that confidence in there's a reason I'm here, and it's because I want to do something after I'm done. And for us as an institution to honor and accept the responsibility of helping them succeed in that space. And it's not too early to start talking about career opportunity, but how do we do it in a measured way that doesn't make them feel like I have to make this decision by day 21 of my first semester, right? But it is helping them, it is honoring that that's why they're here. The majority of them are here because they want to improve their lives. They want to have opportunity after they graduate. And so the more we can do earlier to give them small and increasing exposure to that, the more we're affirming to them, we hear you, we know why you're here, and we want to build a set of experiences for you that are going to continue to build towards that.
Makes great sense. And um the sort of scaffolding that's required, Chase, I'll kind of throw it to you because you brought in, I liked the first experiences wording that you were giving, but I also acknowledge that in sort of the context where you're thinking about the transfer student and trio and all of the different resources that you have to bring to bear from a student success perspective. You've got a lot of ways of looking at first experiences, but you also know this tension that students have early on, where we're asking so much of them when they've got the least to go on, and when they've not quite, they're early in declaring the major. Maybe they've declared a major a few times. Hopefully not, but it happens. Um, what are you seeing at Utah? I know you've got. I mean, from a retention perspective, the University of Utah has great retention rates, right? But you're doing things to sort of support that. So, where do students fall through the cracks or start to fall through the cracks? What are you paying attention to now that is serving sort of longer term strategy?
No, I appreciate the question because I think it kind of takes up a level toward kind of institutional design. And I really appreciate the way that Brandy was describing a kind of both and scenario that if you kind of zoom out and certainly Brandy and Saquon and all the folks at ASU have demonstrated that that zoom out is possible, right? And that great things can be accomplished when you zoom out a little from your own institution. Say, wait a second, do we have to continue the design decisions from 20 years ago, 5 years ago, even? And the answer is no, we don't. Right. But the way President Crow described it recently at I forget where he was, maybe at a Gallup panel or something, this idea like, you don't shoot the horse that brought you here. You think very critically about, which I very much appreciate from a variety of perspectives, like the thinking though of, okay, how do we approach ensuring that are institutional design capabilities, which are pretty immense, right? Like you've got experts running left and right all across your campus. I think one of our mistakes has been, and we've tried to recalibrate within the University of Utah, is to say, like, let's pull in our faculty experts, not only from the College of Education, but from the School of Business, from the school, like the College of Engineering, the ways in which their expertise can be leveraged to think very critically about how we have unintentionally designed higher education. I'm talking about historically, I'm talking about the traditional approach in ways that, if we're honest, I love the way Brandy talked about the responsibility piece. I'd add to it if I can, like, we're complicit to some degree if we aren't willing to address the fact that we've built institutions and our quote unquote like big programs. I mean programs like student success programs. I mean programs of study, the formal degree pathways and the like. We've built them around institutional convenience rather than around student development. And we have done so against, right, a considerable amount of research that would tell us this is how you support any student, right, who is arriving at the institution where, historically we ask students to come up with a major, to figure out our degree requirements, to imagine careers, to Nicole's point earlier, which I really like. Just imagine it, right, before you've even had a meaningful conversation or opportunity to test it out and to explore not just that career, but when I get to meet with first year students as they're coming in, I like to talk about, if we need you to think about yourself, the world, and yourself in the world in new and kind of unrestricted ways, ways that you might not have considered yet, because we're going to pair you up with faculty who are excited about you, with academic advisor and a career success coach that are interested in you. And we're going to stop making, right? Talk about innovation is not always additive. Sometimes innovation is saying, we're going to stop doing that because it's not working. We've got all the data and we're actually going to, this is innovative. We're not going to do it. We're not going to interpret students' uncertainty as a lack of commitment to the institution. To your point, Darin, about our retention rates and our persistence, part of that is recognizing the power of the first year or first experiences with the institution, how tremendously powerful they are as a period of discovery. And I'll just kind of, if I can, say that not doing that, continuing what, our predecessors handed us as how higher ed has been organized and how it either delivers or doesn't, especially post-completion, as Randy was describing it, the cost of that is enormous. And I'm not just talking about performance-based funding, but I'm talking about the individual student level, right? Unnecessary major changes, excessive credits, my own personal, like, what in the world are we doing with dual enrollment and whatever we call it in your state, whatever flavor it takes, stacking all these credits at a low rate it's like credits to nowhere. And one of the challenges is saying, like, we got to stop doing that. Not just delaying graduation and entry into the world of work, but most importantly, I think what our system, or the system, was doing what it was designed to do. And fatally, I think it was teaching our students that temporary uncertainty equals failure. And that will just, it doesn't adhere, or it doesn't kind of cohere, I think, to the world in 2026 or 2027 and beyond. So if I can say anything here, it's that innovation sometimes is stopping doing the things that we think of as some kind of sacred cow. Like sometimes you have to say, wait a second, give me the data on it. Is it really working the way we think? And if it's not, be courageous and brave enough to get a coalition of folks together and say, we're going to stop doing that. And we're going to think of, can we do it better? And the conversations I've had under that banner at the University of Utah have just been transformative. I mean, I've had a great time in the last 5 years under that banner. Like, can we do it better? And at first people are a little nervous. And then very quickly people are like, I think you might have a point. I think we could do this better. Yeah, let's try to do it better. And then, I mean, it just opens all the doors and the windows and all kinds of stuff to a different approach to serve students better.
It's well said. And your credits to nowhere comment really hits home. I mean, I feel like a lot of times that dual enrollment, well-intentioned programming early on does feel like that. I wonder about just to stay on you for a second, Chase. Like I wonder like when we try and inject into the first year or the first experiences, um, you know, greater career discovery um, and opportunities to explore, are we also at risk of creating more of that, like, I'm also afraid of in order to support greater discovery that we also expand and add to the corpus of gen ed that they've
Right.
already gotta go through before they get to some of the interesting stuff, right, is the way they think of
Yeah.
it. So
Yeah. I think, and it's a fair concern. So, I'll just say this, like, one on the dual, and in Utah, we call it concurrent. Not only is it like well accepted that you would take all these courses, it's really well funded by our states. Like, we are funding folks to stack the excess credits before they even arrive at our campus. That may be controversial, and all kinds of folks may contact me afterwards, but we are doing this to ourselves. So, to your question, then, Darren, I would say our ability to balance, which we can, back to Brandy's point, it's a both and. The ability to say, okay, what does purposeful, targeted, strategic exploration look like? And that's what we designed Quest around. Like, what is it in terms of philosophies of self and how that connects to your life and the world of work? And here's a career success coach to help guide you through. Like, here's the expert alongside the faculty to help you disentangle perceptions. I mean, I've been at this in higher ed for over 20 years. The number of students in the first year who will come to us and say, I'm going to be pre med. I'm pre med, I'm pre med, I'm pre med, I'm pre med. And then they slam into either OChem or anatomy, and they're no longer pre med. They've got a choice then to make, right? And they typically bring with them a supporter or a family member in that choice, and rightly so. The same is true in engineering, the same, like, our ability to preempt some of that with more purposeful, planned moments of discovery that says to a student, it's okay to be uncertain, but to balance it, Darren, as you're describing it, there has to be somebody advocating for the balance. Like, we're not going to add extra credits into the gen ed. We're not going to extend this past 120 and less than 6 years graduation. Um, and I can just say, at the University of Utah, folks have received that complexity, and the fact that you've got to strike some kind of equilibrium. It is possible. Like, explaining the pros and cons on either end of that, like how much is too much exploration? What happens when there's no exploration? And coming to some kind of compromise is possible. I can say that we found it at the U.
that's great, and it's encouraging to hear. Nicole, I've got a question for you, but Brandy, I gotta throw it back to you for a second here. So hearing Chase speak about this, um, I'm sort of challenging lightly the idea of like, you know, the credits to nowhere thing that resonated about what he said, and yet this need, as you've so aptly described, Brandy, of doing more work integrated learning earlier on in the curriculum. Like, how are you balancing sort of this extra need for not declaring and exploring uh, with this ability to um, not just be adding more time in seats?
I think a great example is the work integrated learning is built in through the exploration classes, the classes that we have designed to help students explore their interests. We can help them explore it through either simulated or live work experiences. So, there's a lot of low lift, low touch, but very impactful job shadow experiences, job simulation experiences, right? That can be built into these early exploration courses that are giving them, again, real exposure. You have an industry partner who's actually designing a simulation experience or offering, a 1 day job shadow designed, to actually help that student. What is this job actually like? What is this industry actually like? And then also building in the necessary but often missed reflection component attached to these experiences that helps that student process and debrief through that. What did I learn about myself? What did I learn about my interests? Some of the most impactful ones are the ones that help the students say, oh, yep, pre med, not the plan for me. Now I get it. And getting that sooner, but also doing it in a way that is celebrating the decision, celebrating even if the decision is not to, not necessarily with a clarity of what towards, but even just saying, you know what, I did figure out that that's not for me. And that's actually a really good thing in and of itself that I figured that out. So I think, these kinds of work integrated learning opportunities, they need to be scaffolded through the academic journey where they're building in complexity and intensity. But in that first year, starting with stuff that, like I said, job shadows, job simulations, it's just two quick examples, but they're designed by industry or in partnership with industry. So they are giving that student real exposure to what these kind of career opportunities are like, what these industries are like. But they're doing it and it's embedded into an exploratory setting where it does feel safe. To Chase's point, that uncertainty doesn't mean failure. That uncertainty isn't a bad thing. How do you embrace the agency of choice you have at this moment in time in your degree experience? And then how do you make those decisions with intention based upon, your own evidence, your own early experience as to what you think you might like. And so I think that that's, early low lift ways to build this in, that are also necessary to actually help that student really, affirm that understanding or affirm that next decision they're making, whether that's the selection of a different major, the selection of a concentration, or even just clarity of, I think I'm in the major I should be in. And now I'm starting to get some clarity on where this might lead me after I graduate too.
I actually like that. I spent a lot of time around a lot of your partners in this space, guys like Ripen and Podium and Parker Dewey and all these others, and I hear, experiential learning, work integrated learning, work based learning, but I really like the work integrated learning component because what it speaks to me is actually um, getting that real experience, but in the curriculum itself, right? And it's not so it's not constantly bolting something on that extends the overall complexity of what is already a lot of content we've got to go through, but rather just building it in. Um, Nicole, you've lived it. You were an undecided first gen student and later an instructor watching students go through this yourself. What else can you add to this conversation that we're having here? What else are you thinking about?
Yeah, I mean, the whole conversation, I feel like that was me. That was me. Undecided, low income, first gen, changed my major 3 times, had no idea what I was doing, right? I was told, go to college, you'll be successful. How do I get there, right? I had no idea how to make a decision, if that makes sense, right? I felt like I belonged. My university did a great job with that. I felt like college was where I belonged. But the only way to explore was to take an entire class in a different major, right? It wasn't one class that had a bunch of different explorations of different careers like we're trying to build at Podium, but it was, okay, I'm going to take a class in communications, a class in business, a class in Spanish. That takes a lot of time and that takes away from your credits. So, right. So when we're talking about this kind of like system that we should maybe be rethinking, as Chase was saying, I think that that plays a big part in it, this how we get to credit to completion, right? So for me, by my junior, senior year, I had to take 18 plus credit semesters just to graduate in 4 years because I wanted to graduate on time. So all of that is kind of playing into the first year experience. Obviously, there are many other factors than just picking a major that I think should be part of the conversation, right? It's having roommates that you don't get along with, like the dining halls maybe don't offer food that you can eat. You're living away from your parents for the first time, right? There's like all these variables that really impact the first year experience that kind of is more a little like student success, community belonging, but just like general support and help. And when you don't have alignment with like a major or a career, or you feel like you're making progress there, you start to kind of question, what am I doing? Right? You've lost lost from high school your support system, and now you're trying to like build it and go to class on time and try to pass and make this huge life decision. So yeah, living it was definitely stressful. And then as a professor, of course, I've seen so many of my students go through it. I've been on that like other side of let's sit down, let's talk about what you do like, what you don't like, right? These reflective activities we keep coming back to because we can't tell them what to do. We can't tell them I think you should be an engineer, right? Like they need to kind of explore and discover it themselves somehow without spending 2+ semesters of credits worth taking different classes in different majors to get to that point. Um, so yeah, those are like the main things. There's a lot of variables. It's definitely an overwhelming time for especially like myself, first gen, when you can't go home and ask your parents for help. They're just like, you're doing great, you're getting A's, right? Or you're passing or whatever it is. So any way that we can infuse more of that exploratory and it's okay to be exploratory into the first year. I think every first year student is undecided, honestly. Like they're all figuring it out, but
Yeah. I really like uh also just the social and emotional component that you brought in. Um Again with, maybe it's an international student who's not used to the dietary options in the dining hall, or maybe it's a kid who's had a really hard time connecting with others, or is really homesick. And there's so many other um mental health and different components that we have to keep in mind. Um, but with that in mind, actually, because Chase, you brought belonging and connection to your three things. I want to shift over to talking about what's actually working, and we've been hinting at this all along here. You guys have all given great examples of what works, but if we could just dive in a little bit further, Chase, could you tell us more about Quest and where that came from, and what you've seen? Because I think if I'm right, you've had Quest in place now for a number of years, several years, and so what have you seen that's allowed you to sort of double down on that as sort of an initiative at the University of Utah?
Oh, well, I've been here 5 years, and so I can now say, as I look around that, um, Quest emerged out of one of those kind of under that banner, "Can we do this better?" Its predecessor program was longest standing, one of the first year experience kind of programs in the country, and it had been here for like 32 years. And I show up and I say, okay, this is fantastic. Can it be better? Can it do more? How can we ensure that something that students actually need more than you go back 30 years ago, like an extended orientation course? Like, this is how you we know our rules. Now you've come to our institution and we're going to teach you those rules. This is a probably unfair description of the of the way in which, like, 30 years ago, these kinds of courses were put together, innovative as they were at the time. I full acknowledgement of that. And at the same time of thinking about first year and then thinking about and honoring, I love the way you describe it, Nicole, the fact that students who are undecided are exploring, and the students who come in with a declared major are also questioning whether or not that is the right major. That's basically every student. They either come in undecided, and we choose to call them exploring, or they come in a declared major and they're likely not sure about it and will, based off of our data, change majors. Like, the same is true across every college. And I mean, there are some of us, and I was one, who are not normal, quote unquote, when it comes to changing majors. I was a history undergrad on day one. My advisor at the time said, you won't remain a history student, a major. I did, and then went and got a PhD. So our students are not us. They're one, acknowledge that. Our students are not us, right? As faculty and administrators. Okay, so out of that was born kind of two parts of an idea that we should be able to draw on the really great things of the predecessor program, like community and writing competency and a core group of faculty that are recruited specifically, and they come from multidisciplinary, interdisciplinary work to sit down with students and talk about through the curriculum. When I say talk about, like through in a curricular environment, a 3 credit hour course, how do we embed the way Brandy was describing all the various things that we want for incoming students, not overwhelming them, but to your point, Darin, not adding more than they actually need. So not exacerbating the excessive credit. It's a lot, right? So we went through curricular design, we walked through, handed it to faculty and said, okay, what could we do with this program and make it even better? Because we took a long look at some of the data and said, yeah, there's room for improvement. So over the course of it, we emerged with, I think, 6 different courses. One of those courses is now required for exploring students. If you're undecided at the University of Utah, you will take a Quest course with one or two, a few exceptions. And in those courses, with a faculty member, not just on the metacognitive side about what learning looks like at a university, and as you make that transition, which is especially powerful for any number of students from a variety of backgrounds. But to Brandy's point, I think Nicole's point as well, how to reflect. What is this process of reflection, and how should that impact decision making? One of the course's core themes is around decision making, which we layer strategically into major selection. It is a decision, and it's not necessarily a decision that you might not undo later, right? Or you might add to as you go. So let me put it this way: the students are not the major shift for us, and now I think 2.5 years running with Quest. We've seen students that are quote unquote treated with the intervention, so to speak, of Quest in terms of a social experiment, uh, retaining at a higher rate. They are declaring their major early, and the major change post Quest, when we do a comparison between the previously undeclared students who had not been treated with Quest versus those who have, the major change, like they're solidifying and affirming is the language that we use. Like you're declaring the major and we're affirming that that is the right major for you. And those students, we very much anticipate as we continue to follow them longitudinally will complete at a faster rate. We hope that they'll be able to land in career, working with that career success coach that they met early on in the summer before they even started classes at the University of Utah. I would summarize it all by saying that I think it's a different kind of first experience, one that moves us, and other folks are doing it as well, like pushing us beyond thinking about a first year experience that checks boxes, but instead helps the students have the voice that we acknowledge. It demonstrates us listening to that voice and almost real-time programming for the student around what kinds of choices do you want to make? Because this is your education. We're all like, how many times are we going to go like semester, another semester, another semester, another semester? This is their shot at it. And it's a real privilege to be able to sit with them in that moment and help them make the kinds of choices that will put them on a really great path.
I love that you were able to discover something that at an institution as large as the University of Utah really can scale like Quest. This concept. That's because clearly it has to clear a lot of hurdles with a lot of different of students types and I'm sure when you're evaluating courses, there's no small amount of internal work that you had to do to get those courses approved and off the ground.
Yeah. Can I add one very quick piece here? Because it speaks to that kind of the institutional hurdles, which comes at it like, from a very realistic kind of standpoint about how do you make change within an institution. So I mentioned coalition earlier, the ability for us to say students coming in will kind of have this first experience through Quest. If a college or a school or a department wants to develop its own first experience, that is fantastic. Welcome into, the waters of first experience. Here are these 3 design principles, meet the 3 design principles and go. But if you don't have the time or you don't have the interest or whatever, Quest is here for any and all students, and especially will be here for exploring students. So to Brandy's earlier point, it was not letting a kind of either or get in the way of change. It was, no, this can be a both and. In fact, it has to be a both and. Quest is going to be running. You want to come up with your own first experience for humanities majors? Fantastic. For engineering, great. We've seen a lot of success in that kind of partnership work with a lot of our health sciences majors as well, because the enrollment funnels narrow so rapidly that those students, particularly in nursing and in other health sciences majors, we discovered working with our colleagues in nursing, those students are some of the most it's more kind of precise that those students have an exploratory mindset because they may actually many of them may not get into nursing. And so the question of putting them out in the world and letting them figure out what happens next is just not acceptable for us any longer. Like, we need them prepared with information to be able to work with an advisor and a career success coach to know what the next decision set, what does it look like? What are the parameters? What kind of choices can I make that will keep me moving forward in my education here at the U?
Yeah, especially with an area of health science and all of the different potential choices you can be making there. That makes a lot of sense. Well, Brandy, um, I'm thinking back to your comments about sort of the collaborative nature of your role at ASU and the work you're doing today with Work Plus Learn. Um, Talk a little bit from your perspective about what's working, and you've hit on it quite a bit with the work integrated learning component. But I'd also just be curious to hear your thoughts on um, ASU, also a very large institution, and so you're working collaboratively with others. Just curious some of your thoughts about what's working well and what you're most excited about.
Yeah, I think that, and I think both Nicole and Chase have kind of alluded to this too, but there's this interesting, alongside the focus on, how do we shift our mindset and think about the organization of our people, our funding, our structures around post completion success. There's also this, I'd say, momentum we're getting behind this concept of focusing on time to value and our job to bring as much value as quickly as possible to our learners. I think alongside this, again, we definitely for a period of time we're in time a focus on time to degree. How do we ensure that our learners can get that credential as quickly as possible for financial reasons, for time, reasons? How do we not, delay them? We've talked about it a lot today of how do we not add extra credits, right? There's also this concept of like we literally sit in a moment where our learners are making decisions, and Chase alluded to this semester by semester. Is this worth my time, my mental energy, and my financial resources to even continue into next semester or next quarter, right? This isn't we're not in a place where folks are making a decision at the get-go and they're committing to it long term. They're trying to figure out, can I and should I stick with this for another semester? And there's a couple different ways to look at time to value. There's actual like formulas and calculations that institutions are doing to help show the value comparatively to high school graduates not pursuing degrees in their areas. I think about the University of North Texas, a good partner of ours, and some of our work that has that. But I think, where we've seen some success internally at ASU is just this conversation of how do we make sure our students feel value of their investment every single semester? How do we help them, ensure that they feel like the courses they're taking, the support they're receiving, the commitment they're making is proving value to them. And that value sometimes when we think about the learner who maybe has 5 to 8 years of industry experience under their belt, and maybe they're coming back to complete a degree they started a while ago. Maybe they're coming to start a degree for the purposes of elevating, within their particular position or the industry they're in, right? How can we provide experiences that might even help them hit that before graduation, get a promotion within their actual organization they're in right now, help them, get exposure or get onto a project or a committee within their existing organization they wouldn't have been able to without some of the learning experiences we're providing to them now. I think there's some momentum around that, that we've seen a lot of progress with at ASU, which is this, it doesn't even have to be completion to be of value to our students. And how do we embrace that and think about, um, that the value doesn't come exclusively by the collection of experiences. The value can come within singular experiences. And if we take that mindset and we think about our classes in that way, we think about the academic opportunities we're offering our students and design them around immediate value, that likely we will retain those students through completion because they're feeling that, okay, my investment for one more semester is worth it. My investment for the next semester after that is worth it.
It's a fair amount that we could double down on. I want to be sensitive to our time because there's a few more things I want to get to with you guys, and I want to um, make sure we have time for it. But Nicole, before I jump on into the next section here, I'm interested in just getting your perspective. What Put your instructor hat on because that's what you're doing really at Podium, but it's also what you've done in other roles, and talk about what convinced you that this kind of discovery needed to live inside of the curriculum. Um,
Yeah.
Share more about that.
Yeah, I would say there are really two main things that convinced me of this. The first was before I got my PhD and taught in higher ed, I founded an internship program. And so I was on the employer side of a small company, recruiting, training interns, right? Building it out on that side of the experiential learning, right? And just the impact it had on students. I mean, that's what actually encouraged me to go get my PhD and be a professor because I was working with college students and just seeing them gain this real world work experience and feel confident and excited about future careers, it was beautiful, right? If that's the goal. So that's on the one side of it, and we also hired many of our interns. So it was very win-win, right? The goal. But really teaching college freshmen, I think that also became very eye-opening for me. A common part of a college writing classroom is we teach them basics of research, how to use the library, right? How to do all the things you're going to need to do at a higher level in your upper classes. For me, I built in that they had to interview an industry expert as part of their research projects, right? So students had to go find a director of health, or it didn't have to be a director, but someone that could speak to their research topic. So I was teaching them lots of like soft, durable skills, like how to interview someone and come up with interview questions. But at the same time, they were talking to industry professionals, ideally related to their major. I encourage them to pick topics related to like what they're interested in or might be interested in. But the impact that had in the classroom, like there are no words to describe it. Like they came back to the classroom confident, excited, maybe affirmed or confirmed in a new way what they wanted to do with a career. I had some students who interviewed the like director of public health in Tucson. They got this person on a call, right? And they were just so excited and they were like, I'm so glad I chose nursing. And it's very eye-opening when you bring in these kind of career-connected, work-integrated learning experiences. Now, of course, as an educator, I could not scale that. College writing classes are usually very small, maybe 25 students. So it was very impactful, but only maybe 100 students or so a semester that I was actually getting to help with this. So now at Podium, we have the chance to kind of scale this a little bit more through the career discovery experience. But through those two, really, the internship that I ran and just seeing the way that students lit up and felt like they had purpose and felt like they wanted to continue in college because they kind of had more clarity, that did it for me. That was like, it needs to be in the curriculum, right? It shouldn't be this add-on.
Yeah, yeah. No, well said. And I actually like that you kind of brought us back to sort of like the durable skills components too, because it also kind of reminds me that yes, we're asking a student to get, you know, convicted and confident that they're able to persist through and towards that degree or certificate or whatever it is they're working towards. Um, but we also know that we're preparing them for this work world that is just so ambiguous and you know, I mean, many of us haven't stayed in the same roles uh, more than X number of years, and they're suggesting, you know, students are going to have roles that don't exist today due to AI, and so I do think that there's an element that I would love for you each to think about and share around as we focus on sort of the post completion success as Brandy was terming this. Um, you know, what are we? Is it really that it was the specific major that they needed to declare, or was it that job that they were trying to find, or was it that they actually along the way we know that they were learning inside the curriculum these durable skills and competencies along the way anyway, I'm curious how you would frame that in your own uh, experiences there. Either Brandy or Chase. Any thoughts on bringing the competency and skill component into the curriculum and the relevance there?
So the work at the University of Utah, like within the last year, or if not like last 6 months, I mean, our kind of commitment to durable skills being, as we are describing it, infused into every undergraduate course, not just into our first experience courses, but naming, and it's kind of the bridge. I like the way Brandy was describing it. It's not, I like to think about it as like, it's not an AAC and U liberal education versus a NACE competency based, these are the work ready skills that you would need. No, in fact, we've got to be able to do both. And as we describe a kind of project that we're calling Infusion, it's exactly that. Here are the traditional learning outcomes, and right alongside it, if not tethered to them exactly, here are the work competencies and durable skills that you're picking up are actually leveraging artificial intelligence to help us make that map and then also help drive kind of course design and then up to program design and up to, university level, essential level learning outcomes. Because I think it's related in some way to the ownership piece, Darin, right? That like who's in charge in this space? Is it curricular? Is it co-curricular? Is it career services? And it turns out, I love the way Brady described it earlier, it's a shared responsibility that we all have. And in the way that it can be both everyone's work, but that requires accountability to say, okay, when are we not getting the work done? Because then that requires a functional coalition to accomplish the work rather than, any kind of finger pointing or folks who might push away from the table and say, well, that isn't my job. That's not what I was, quote, hired to do. That's not traditionally what faculty do. Or we leave this component over. Belonging is over in student affairs. It doesn't happen over here, in the first experience. Like, questioning some of that and driving folks toward a better set of solutions through a shared responsibility framework has been our approach to saying durable skills will be in the curriculum, because why wouldn't they be? And if you believe that your curriculum was designing those and was contributing to those in the long run anyway, why not then articulate that for students in a way that's transparent, both for students, for yourselves, as well as for our industry partners?
Yeah, no, it makes a lot of sense. And Brandy, I mean, this kind of goes back to your time to value versus time to degree comment too, where I mean, as you think about work integrated learning and sort of an uncertain job market, this blending into the curriculum as opposed to bolting on.
I'll try to quickly summarize. I think that there's so much conversation around this concept of things like skills-based hiring. Yet there's been an incredible, difficult wall of industry trying to, crack this. What does skills-based hiring really mean, and how do we do it effectively? We hear that from our industry partners, not just through the lens of ASU, but nationally, and so many of the associations we're a part of and we work with. But I think if you really break that down, what employers and industry are actually asking for is effective demonstration of competency. We are no longer in a place that degree can serve as the sole proxy that guarantees a certain proficiency and competency. We actually need to develop ways that our learners are actively demonstrating that competency or that proficiency within that competency to employers. For us, we sit in a space that we believe intentional design of the academic experience and work integrated learning as a foundation of that enables that. When I say intentional design, again, that's where we have that reflection component. We have that recording and communicating. We're teaching students how to talk about this is what I did, and this is what I learned, and this is the skill set I've built. There's a lot of discussion, and Chase pointed this out, which I think is so important. Of there's so many different frameworks, there's so many different skill frameworks and terminology to use out there around, and that's where people sometimes I think get lost in the what skills we choose to use as our framework. And I think we've seen some success if you kind of step away from that and you actually frame it around we're trying to teach our students how to effectively demonstrate what they know and what they've learned and what we've helped them learn, right? And if we can agree upon that and we can center upon that, knowing the taxonomies of skills, there's many out there, and we're not trying to push and say one is more right than the other. But what we are trying to show is that we have created an experience that students are graduating and they know how to demonstrate. They have artifacts, they have language, they have the ability to actually say, here's what I can do for you, to an employer, to an industry partner, that they're looking for employment with. I think that's where we've seen, some of the most success, as of most recently.
And it's actually great to see, really that's where, I mean, several points along this conversation, Brandy and Chase have had strong agreement on on both strategy and on what you're doing on the ground in terms of making this work. But I do like that. um I think the fear for a lot of people is that institutions can't move quickly enough to integrate into the curriculum what's necessary, to get in the direction that we're headed. And we did start here in from a conversational standpoint of first year experience, but I think it's great that we've actually bled this into the entire experience, because at the end of the day, what you're saying, Brandy, is also true. These students are making these decisions, you know, semester to semester and course by course, not necessarily a decision in year one that persists through year four or beyond. Um, Very helpful. It makes me think too. I've got a client I'm working with out of, she's a researcher out of Columbia University. She's got a NSF grant, and she's actually looking at, really tracking competency, um, across the curriculum, much in the way that you're both describing. Definitely using AI and whatever. I'm not the technologist behind this. She's just explaining as the research scientist how they're looking at trying to bring this along. But what's interesting is that she's, having success having these conversations with community colleges, with four-year larger universities, with smaller private institutions. And the truth is that we're all, regardless of what institution you happen to sit at, we're all at this point of having to do this hard work of building into the curriculum something much more durable, from a work integrated learning perspective. Um, Maybe let me ask you kind of a final question each. And I'm wondering about just like whether this is, I don't even know if this is a fair question, but I'm going to ask it anyway. Um, what do you think that we have to stop doing, or what did you have to stop doing in order to see the kinds of improvements and turnaround that put you on the path that you're on today? Like what had to be set aside? Anybody can go first. But Chase, whether that be in the Quest scenario, Brandy, it could be anything with regard to the work plus learn world. And certainly Nicole, it could also just be what you think had to be set aside even to make this new course that you're heading up successful. But anyway, want to take a stab at what you might have had to give up in order to see the success you're having today.
I will say this, I'm really eager to hear, because I admire, again, the really great work that ASU has been doing for some time now. So I'm really eager to hear what Brandy has to say. So I'm going to get mine out of the way so I can hear what Brandy has to say. Um, I think part of that is dependent, right, on where we are in the kind of life of the organization of the institution, right? How, like, where we sit at present for the things that we had to sunset, right? And part of that was around our mindset toward thinking organizationally. Like, we had to shift and stop actually coming at some of our most pressing challenges that we might measure through persistence or completion or job placement. All those stayed, but how we had historically addressed those opportunities, the provost here, Mitzi Montoya, likes to say that when I refer to the way that we've run our experiments, our experiments were kind of what we inherited, right? And they had delivered the outcomes that we took up when we arrived in our positions. Now, are we okay with those outcomes? If we're not okay with those outcomes, reflect on that experiment and get busy trying to think more developmentally and from a design framework where, quite frankly, like students don't care where offices report. Students don't care about the things that staff, faculty, administrators get worked up about. They do not care. Their parents don't care. Their supporters don't care. They could not care less about the things that we often get hung up on. They care about whether or not somebody knows them, about whether or not the curriculum makes sense. Is it transparent? Is it clear? Is it going to contribute to their future? Like, and so for us, that required a reset to an extent that we're still living through. Like, we're not done yet, right? It is iterative, it is ongoing. How we organize our work and then reorganize our work. Or Kathy Davidson at one point said, she was at Duke and I think is at CUNY now, like the thing about like unlearning a thing for an institution of higher education is incredibly powerful. Tapping into that power so that we could focus instead on student experience rather than our organizational chart. Now, of course, like we continue to work through org charts because that's how we express like reporting lines and everything else. But instead, focusing students and ourselves on the kinds of questions that matter most to students and families and supporters, like who am I? What kind of problems do I want to solve? What kind of person am I going to be when I leave the institution? That's far more important and more exciting. And focusing on that and the joy of that has been a shift for us. So there's some stop doing some stuff in there somewhere, Darin, and starting doing other things. And with that, I'm really eager to hear what both Brandy and Nicole might say.
Oh, that's great. Yeah, and I mean, I appreciate that it isn't any one thing, and it's also perpetual. Like you're constantly in that state of doing that. Yeah. Brandy or Nicole, either of you, which would like to go next?
Okay, I'll try to keep it brief. So I think there are really two things when we're thinking about designing, redesigning, innovating the first year experience, especially as sort of like a career or major exploration, so to speak. And they're both kind of who we bring in as thought partners. One is the employers, the industry partners. I think if we can get employers into the classroom in front of students, we're destigmatizing this like, oh, I couldn't possibly email a director of public health. I couldn't, you know what I mean? The students are very nervous about talking to professionals. So the more we can do that, they get more comfortable and then they get more comfortable professionally. The other big thought partner is our career services, our career people, right? Like they have been doing this for a while. They help with bringing in these partners, of course, but they're also great thought partners on strategies and techniques for exploring careers, whether it's, ikigai or different tests or just what types of reflective activities can we guide students to. So I would just say like it shouldn't just be, it's a community of experts that we can bring in to really make this innovative and helpful from day one.
I double click 100% on my colleague statements here too. I think of, something from the ASU lens to say that of what we've let go of or stopped. And to be very clear, we're not 100% successful at this yet. Like, I think that that's also a thing that it's, we're a work in progress like everybody else. But I think this letting go of this separation of our university or our post-secondary education experience in the real world. We so often talk about like experiential learning is intended to help you get exposure to the real world. What we've done is declare that the real world is not their academic experience, and that immediately undermines the experience we're offering our students, right? And so I think some progress that we've made, and I hope that we can continue to make for of is how do we accept that our university experience or the college experience we're designing is the real world, and to emphasize that by bringing in industry partners, right? That Nicole was talking about, by thinking about industry design project experiences that get infused into the curriculum, job shadows or job simulations. How do we, embrace the multitude of experience that we can scaffold and offer our students leading up to things like internship? but also embrace that we as institutions are in ourselves the real world too. A small example of this that we've worked on a lot over the past several years is student employment, and how if universities can embrace the idea that we in ourselves are an employer that can offer real world experience to the students that work part-time jobs with us, we've then enabled them to not have to go out external to the institution and find another job that provides them relevant direct work experience that is supporting and is, supplementing what they're learning in the classroom too. So I think I would just say that going away, like, how do we stop separating the real world of post completion from the academic journey that they're on with us, and marry those things and help our students see that this is a journey in the real world that you're getting, and that we as institutions are providing, relevant experience and work opportunity and exposure to these things, and it's not a separation. I think that that's important for us to continue to try to do.
Well said. I can't begin to start to summarize this conversation. It's going to take me some time to think about it, but I really just want to extend my gratitude for you guys taking the time. We were literally, I have so many more questions. I could keep you here another hour, but I've already extended you beyond what I've asked for, and I just really appreciate you taking the time to have this conversation with us. And I look forward to getting some of the feedback that we'll get after this episode airs. So thanks again to Brandy, to Chase, to Nicole, all three of you for your time today and talking through the first year experience and beyond.